Hey, I'm your host, Bree Wild, and this is Marquee Memories. Here we sit down with your favorite artists to talk about their top concert memories as fans. Today's guest is a singer-songwriter, half of an iconic synth-pop duo promoting their latest release, Syndicate. He's bringing their cinematic sonics to the U.S. this spring with the Time Machines Tour. Tyler Lyle of The Midnight, welcome.
Hi, thank you so much.
Yeah. So the Time Machines Tour actually kicked off the top of this year in China, and then you went to Australia. But you mentioned in another interview that you travel lighter for those. So what is going to be added to the U.S.?
So video has not ever been a prominent part of our live set, and it needs to be. It's such a cinematic sonic universe that we've made. We wanted visuals to accompany it. But it's always been a matter of like growing the live show at an appropriate sort of pace. Now it's time for bigger video, a bit bigger of a vision, but we couldn't travel with all the video to Australia and China.
So the U.S. is getting a video.
For sure, yes.
Okay, all right, cool. I know that your other half, Tim, doesn't tour, and total respect for that. Is he still involved in how he wants the songs to be perceived live?
Absolutely, yeah. We sat down in December and kind of planned out the tour. His brother's name is Ollie McEwen and Oliver. And so Oliver is our music director. So the three of us kind of worked out how we wanted the sound and the video and the lights and how we wanted to tell the story. So Tim is very much still involved in that part of it.
Nice.
Yeah.
Speaking of travel, your band is so internationally beloved. The YouTube comments are in every language. Did you travel to those places and acquire the fan base? Or did the fan base require that you go there? Which came first?
Yes.
Yes, both.
Maybe the more interesting story about this is Northeast India, around Aizawl. And we saw lots of streaming numbers there, and we didn't have a presence or any knowledge of it. And so we found someone crazy enough to partner with us in India, and we just went to see, and we found the fans, and they came out and they sang along and they knew every word. So usually if we are in town, we'll go to other markets nearby, but that was a case of like just going, well, let's see what this actually is.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Are there any other streaming numbers that you're like, okay, this is a curious place that we might want to visit?
China was that really. They're on different systems than we are here in the U.S., and you just don't know until you try. So a lot of it is kind of fact finding and exploratory, and then once you develop those relationships, then you go back and explore a little more.
Does it feel a little bit like trailblazing? Like you're like, who's played in this place before us?
Definitely some of the India shows that we played were pretty far out. Yeah. And it felt like we were, Indiana Jones tour group for a little while.
That's really cool. Shall we get into some of these memories?
Yeah. The White Stripes at Music Midtown in Atlanta, Georgia in 2005. I was there with a couple friends. One was very much on the side of Tom Petty. One was on the White Stripes. And I knew that this was a big decision. They were both playing separate main stages at the same time.
Cool.
I'm right. I mean, I think I saw the Killers there that day. It was a formative time. But I chose the White Stripes, and they had the peppermint, like red and white, candy-colored, candy cane, set pieces. And it was an amazing show. It was really iconic. But I never got to see Tom Petty before he passed. So I think about that as that was a crossroads moment for my young music watching self.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And were you playing music yourself yet at this time?
2005. Yeah, I think I played my first open mic at Eddie's Attic in 2006. So I was probably writing a lot of bad songs in my small apartment in Atlanta at that time. Yeah.
Nice. What else about Music Midtown? Had you been to Music Midtown before? Was it your first time there?
So that was kind of the de facto festival. I only lived in Atlanta as an adult for a few years before I left and came to LA and then New York. But we got to play Music Midtown a couple years ago, so that was fun.
Full circle.
Yeah. I think Billie Eilish was on the bill later that day. It was cool. It was good. It was a nice homecoming to return after 20 years.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess you haven't seen White Stripes since then. Jack White at all?
I think I've seen Jack White. He came to the Tabernacle recently. I love the things that he's making with Fender and with Third Man Records, and the pedals and the guitar is really, really cool stuff. I have a lot of respect for him.
Nice.
Yeah.
If you could take any magic from Jack White or the White Stripes and bring it into your own show, what would you?
He's got a fearlessness about him that's just kind of out there. It's a take or leave. I think he's got the eye of a designer curator, but he's not afraid to throw paint at a wall, and I like that.
He's pretty outspoken too.
Yeah, yes, can be.
So, did you grow up in like a musical family?
Yeah, so the way I say it, my dad was in country and classic rock cover bands on Friday and Saturday night, and then he was the minister of music for a very small like country Methodist church on Sunday morning. So I feel like I got American folkways direct from the source. We had, the gospel, like the black gospel groups that would come in every fourth Sunday, and the bluegrass and the blues. And my dad's old record collection was pretty mighty. So yeah, I grew up with music in all directions.
Did it feel inevitable? Like, yeah, this is what I'm going to do?
My dad he taught songwriting in Carrollton, Georgia for NSAI. And then over school breaks, we would go to Nashville, and he would play at the Bluebird Cafe, and he was always trying to make it in songwriting or in Nashville. And I just had no appetite for it at all. Nashville stole all my school vacations. It's all like hearing grown men talk about like bass cabs. Like as a 10-year-old, I was just so turned off. I was like, I'm never following.
I'm going to be a lawyer.
That's right. I'm going to be the pitcher for the Atlanta Braves. Yeah, he taught my sister a few chords on the guitar when I was like 13 or 14, and I was, just in the room watching, and I picked it up, and we had a dial-up internet connection and could find my Dave Matthews guitar tabs, and that was it. That was the beginning. I couldn't put the cat back in the box or bag or whatever the expression is.
So you've been pretty much doing music the whole time.
Yeah. I was singing in the church choir at 8.
So you didn't actually rebel after all.
I tried my best. I really did.
Nice. Let's go to
Yelle at Emos for South by Southwest in 2009. We all need these people in our lives who have better musical taste than we do.
No, and it's me. It's me.
You're the. I don't know what it's like to be that person yet. Maybe one day I will. My friend John Cole, he used to write songs. He's a very talented designer. But we were going to South by Southwest. I think I was playing a small showcase at the time. We had a philosophical discussion about what music was for. I'd just recently seen Josh Ritter play with his band, and I love Josh Ritter. He's one of the kind of the North Stars of current generation folk music. And I said, John, music is for thinking. Like it's an intellectual exercise that should keep you like warm and cozy and full of like reflection. And he said, okay. And then I went to South by Southwest, and I knew about Yelle, Yelle, because I'd lived in Paris for a little while and learned about tectonic, which was this kind of like offshoot of French touch. It's like an electronic dance kind of style, similar to like some parts of the Midnight. But I saw her show in Austin, and it was so much fun, and it was a dance party. And I drove back from Austin to Atlanta with John, and I said, I'm going to amend, music is for dancing, and that's all it's for. Like you don't need any mind, you don't need any intellect, you just need to move your body, and that's what it's for. So I've seen Yelle a few times. Actually, when I was cutting a record here in LA, she was with her band in the lobby, and I had to ask her and her friends if they would keep it down so that I could record vocals. And only after I asked them did I realize, oh no, that's that's Yelle.
So what did you like about their show? How did they change your mind?
I think because my grasp of the French language was still pretty minimal at the time, I didn't realize what filthy lyrics they have. But it's all in French, and it's fun, and it's tongue-in-cheek, and there was this A Cause de Garçon was one song that they were like, that kind of made them a little more known on the internet. And it was a dance video on YouTube when YouTube was still early. It's just really fun and really new. And it was kind of a growing up in the Americana, bluegrass country rock world. It was just such a departure from what I knew, especially living in Paris and going to the Paris Social Club and Kavinsky and Daft Punk and Sebastian. Like that offshoot was really attractive to somebody like me who had not, hadn't spent much time in that world. So, yeah, it was a fun dance party.
Is that what the midnight shows are like?
I think they can be. I think part of the midnight is evolved from that like Bloghouse early 2000s era, like MIA, Paper Planes, Diplo, Kavinsky, Daft Punk, that little nexus of energy that was like indie dance. And then I think the other part of the midnight is the 80s film score that's like heavily synthesized or heavily not a social thing, a very individual listening experience. And so I think we take both strands and weave our own little story from that. Yeah.
How does that work into a live show? How do you do both of those?
I think we still have tickets left for the Palladium.
I'll be there.
Yeah. I think with 6 people on stage, we can do a lot more than we used to be able to. And so to be able to kind of be dynamic in our set is really fun, to have those pensive, expansive cinematic moments and then to also have a dance party. Those are just things that we want to hit.
How do you build a team of people who can execute your vision? Is it like a job interview or?
It's relational, like everything else. Yeah, you find
people.
A
guy who knows a guy.
Yeah, well, I mean, the internet is helpful in some ways in that you can see other people doing interesting things and going, I wonder what that flavor would be like in this story that we're telling. We've always said that the Midnight Live is kind of like a super group because everyone comes from their own very separate lane. You've got the singer-songwriter element. You've got the smooth jazz. That's Justin Klunk. You've got the blues rock guitarist guy. You've got Oblivion, who is kind of this like new metal melodic house producer making, kind of shreddy synth lines. And, throw it all together and it's something greater than the sum of its parts. And that's the fun of it.
Has the Midnight ever played South by Southwest?
I don't think so. I certainly have, but no, the Midnight has not.
Has a different era of your?
Yes, with my acoustic guitar. Nice. Yeah.
Did you live near there at the time or did you travel?
I was traveling. I lived in Paris in 2008. And
how many places have you lived?
Too many. I think because I grew up in the Deep South, as soon as I got the chance to leave, I did.
Fair.
I was certified to teach English as a foreign language in Prague, and then I taught English in Paris badly. But that was the beginning of my music career. Okay. There were some Scottish pubs and American bars that I would go and play music at until late at night.
That's where your singer-songwriter phase started.
Yeah.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. And then I came back and made a record and then saw Yelle the next year at South by Southwest.
Nice.
Yeah.
You mentioned in another interview too that you and your producer, Tim, were kind of put on like a music blind date.
Yeah.
How did you know you guys were going to work?
For some reason, I'm always attracted to people whose fuel I don't understand. I don't know what drives them. And I think it's just a curiosity and wanting to be around them to kind of like figure that out. So Tim and I were put together in a writing room in LA, and I lived in LA from 2011 to 2014. And 4 or 5 days a week, I would be on a co-writing session. And it's a really interesting way to spend creative energy. And we were just put together in a North Hollywood studio. And he was living in Denmark at the time and was making pop dance music. And I was, the quote unquote country writer in LA. And we talk about the Venn diagram and, he's over here and I'm over here. And just that little sliver in the middle was so interesting to dig into. And so that's what became the Midnight over the course of a few years.
And that world was kind of new to you, right? Like the
Yeah.
synth pop.
Yeah, I remember him creating a loop and going, okay, write the first verse. I'm going to go out for coffee. And he comes back and I'd written the first verse. And he said, well, where's the rest of it? And I said, what do you mean? You only wrote the chords for verse 1. He said, no, write the chorus over the same loop. And I thought, you can't do that because it's just, three chords. But it turns out you can do that. You just create a new melody over the same chords. And that was the beginning of the Midnight. And I thought, well, this will be an interesting experiment to dig into, because I'd just written confessional singer-songwriter songs up until that point. And I thought, well, this music is so expansive and cinematic and visual. I wonder what would happen if I just write the scene. Don't tell the story, just write the images of the scene, of the environment. And that was kind of how the experiment of songwriting for the Midnight began.
Do you feel like I cracked open another part of your brain?
Yeah.
Just do that.
For sure. It got me out of the way.
Yeah.
I was tired of my own stories, and I wanted to dig into the world of myth and symbol and archetype and see what was in there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
All right, let's go to
Zedd's Firefly Fest in Delaware, 2019. So Zedd was familiar with us. We were playing Firefly as well, on a much smaller stage, and we get to hang out with him and his team before his set, and it was really wonderful to talk to him, and just like a very normal guy. And this was early on in our touring years, and then we stood at front of house, which is where the sound guy pushes the faders, and his performance was such. It was a little bit like the Yelle show, but with time-coded visuals. Everything was pyro and lights and lasers, and everything was just so perfectly orchestrated that up until that point, I thought our live experience needed to be something, the tightness of the group, or some kind of musicality, or some kind of like relational dynamic on stage.
like a rock band.
Like a rock band. But I saw Zedd as a DJ with a time-coded set, where everything felt like a roller coaster. It felt like I was in a Disney ride, and you couldn't not pay attention to it. It just kind of grabbed you and shook you for an hour and 15 minutes. And when you finished the ride, you thought, I want to do that again. And that was the first time I'd ever really been to that kind of high production level of a dance set, or like a DJ, like main stage, big stage kind of set. And it was really compelling, especially for someone with my background. So the challenge is how to inject a little bit of that into the Midnight world, where it becomes a bigger production, so that you can have, the tightness of the band on stage and have, the group dynamics, but also it is a spectacle, and it is meant primarily for fun and for people to come and enjoy themselves, and to be, grabbed by the lapels and shaken around a little bit.
That's really cool. Do you think that you started thinking about injecting those elements into it like right after you saw the show?
I think so. The Midnight as a live project, I think we played our first show in 2017. It was really a question. We were just pestered by this one promoter in San Francisco for long enough that we finally agreed to try and put a date together. And it was mostly track based. And as we gained a little bit of momentum, we played a show here at the Globe. And after that, we had a booking agent and a manager and the whole team. And the question was, how do you skin a live experience for this very, it's an individual listening experience. I very much feel like Pink Floyd's Dark Side of the Moon was meant for you to listen in stereo on headphones as you walk through the world. I think that's how people experience the Midnight. And so to make it a live show, I thought, well, coming from my background playing with bands, it doesn't seem that fun to just sing on tracks, right? Otherwise it's midnight karaoke, and I'm not digging deeply. So we made it a rock band. We had four people on stage then, and it went to 5, and now it's 6. But now we have the tools to be able to go back and to touch on that feeling of the Zedd show at Firefly. I recently saw Justice as well in an arena with Kate Trinata. That was the same feeling. It was like, I just want to feel shaken up for a little while.
Nice.
Yeah.
I guess I was thinking of how you said like the midnight is like a thinking experience, but also a dancing. So is it like trying to bring that balance to your shows with the set list?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
I'm asking you all these things about the show that hasn't happened yet, but I mean,
Well, yeah, that's true. At this point, I turned 40 this year, and the midnight is the big story. It's the big event. It feels very similar, and I'm not in this world remotely. But when I was a teenager, there was like the mega church thing with the big lights and the fog and we get to touch on that. This is not I'm not a religious person at all. This is not a religious thing, but that was what I got instead of going to see U2 or Coldplay as a kid, because I never saw them as a kid in my formative years. But that big spectacle,
the rallying of
the collective effervescence, right? Just that spirit of a big crowd singing along to the same song. So I want to hit that. I want to hit these sort of ambient moments that's mostly Tim's kind of lane, but it's meditative and it's quiet. And then the heart is the folk singer. That's the here's my story, and this is we're people sharing a moment. And then the body is the 4 on the floor kick drum, where everybody can kind of dance during sunset, and then by the time it's over, feeling like, okay, well, I jumped around a little bit. Like if we can hit those 4 targets, then I feel like we've done it.
Also, in one of your interviews, you mentioned how like, you know, it is 80s type music, but you know, their instruments and their sound recording wasn't as good then. So you kind of have a better experience with it now than you would then.
Yeah. You know, certain reverbs came out in the 80s, or the DX7 with FM synthesis. You had these very specific tools that made very specific sounds, and people had an appetite for that for a little while, and then they didn't. And everything kind of changed. It went to like hair metal to grunge, and then, Lilith Fair, acoustic rock. Also, I think we were helped out by GarageBand, including these sounds in their like synthesizer samples of these old synthesizers, but now compressed and EQ'd, and they sound big and robust and much cleaner than the originals did. Yeah. So a lot of bedroom producers are beginning their career with these sounds, with the ARP bass, with the Oberheim, with the Moog. Mini Moog sounds. So that was our playground in 2012, 2013, kind of before everyone found it. So we were just the people that were doing it at the time. Yeah. Yeah.
I think I read in another interview too, they said that like some bands that make music like yours might not even bother to tour. They're just like, here, listen to our music on your own in your bedroom.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you said somebody made you tour. Somebody said there's demand for it.
Yeah, we were tricked.
But you enjoy it.
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
Also, like, I respect that you don't make Tim tour. Like, he's good at what he's good at.
Yeah.
But, he's still involved in the creative process, and but he doesn't have to be uncomfortable where out of his space, I guess.
He didn't grow up touring. He was 40 years old when we started touring, and it's a hard life to get used to. I was lucky that I had my 10 years of I call it the sadness and deprivation tour in my hatchback of touring coffee shops and small venues in my 2004 Toyota Matrix for a while. But I like the openness of tour and the possibility and the fresh places and faces.
Yeah, you might get to go a lot of cool places, starting China, India.
Yeah.
That's cool.
Yeah.
You're going to be busy with the tour, but are there any shows or tours you're planning to go to as a fan?
Ooh, I know Bruce Springsteen's coming. I saw him on Broadway, but I haven't seen him live with the E Street Band. I'd like to see him. I want to go to more like DJ shows. I want to go to the big, but I can't, I like to go to bed early.
And those ones always start at like midnight.
Yeah, right?
2 a.m.
We did a few midnight DJ sets, and they would go from like 2 to 4 in the morning. It's just insane.
You're like, I'm going to
hours.
see a nap first, and then I'm going to go.
I know. I wake up at 5, so that's like the time that I would be waking up. But I would like to do that as a practice. It was just to get out a little more nightlife.
All right.
Yeah.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, good luck on the tour.
Thank you very
Hope it's
much.
awesome. Maybe I'll come so I can understand what it is.
Please come. Please come. Our fans are amazing.
Yeah, cool. Thank you.
Cool.